my only request for everyone is to be really thoughtful and go into the choices you make with eyes wide open. I think there's a number of folks in different countries, and I won't point out any particular one, where folks are going to be wondering about the choice they may be made in elections. Let's not be that kind of country in Canada. Let's be deliberate about the choices we make.
Instead of focusing on his campaign promises, which he has already made clear he won't be keeping Donald Trump's infatuation since Election Day has been the Panama Canal Greenland and making Canada the 51st state, and in talking about this and posting about it and just all of the ridiculous commentary coming out of MAGA, Donald Trump has not only embarrassed himself, but he's accomplished something, unfortunately. And that's distracting from his inability to keep these promises. But someone who is not allowing Donald Trump to do that is Justin Trudeau, who in the wake of all of this nonsense is pointing out why Donald Trump is really talking about Canada. Because he knows he has to distract from the failures that will be coming in his second administration, and Trudeau did just that nuking Donald Trump's plan in a clip from an interview that I want to check out. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really means the world to me now. Of course, Trudeau coming after Donald Trump and calling them out has led to a complete meltdown that we're going to talk about. But first, let's get into Justin Trudeau.
The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Prime Minister Trudeau, it's great to see you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy visit to Washington to join me here in studio.
I'm glad to be here.
And you're, of course, here for the state funeral of former President Carter. Canada has also been assisting in responding to the wildfires out in California, including with Canadian water bombers in the sky, which I know is something greatly appreciated by the people of California. I wanted to ask you, it is clearly a fraught time in U.S.-Canada relations. And this all seems to me to be a clear effort and concerted effort to make clear to the public that this is an important relationship, that Canada is committed to this relationship. Is that a fair read?
Well, I was going to be here no matter what, whenever President Carter passed away, because he'd shown up for my father 25 years ago during my father's funeral, and it was a tremendous friendship, not just between our countries, but between those two men. So being there for him was important for me. In regards to the fires, well, we went through some horrific fires over the past years as well, and American firefighters showed up for us, and we're glad to help out in any way. Unfortunately, we have now a developed level of expertise around wildfire interface with urban areas where we're there to help out with, whether it's transport planes or Coast Guard cutters or water bombers or even firefighters. It's all there to help our friends in California.
No, it's greatly appreciated, the contributions that they're making. You may disagree with my suggestion that it's a fraught relationship, but I think some see it that way. But I think one of the reasons is because Donald Trump is, of course, going to be inaugurated in just over a week from now. He has been pushing this idea of making Canada the 51st state. I know that's not something you've taken too kindly to, but how seriously do you take that threat?
I mean, let's remember, I got to work with President Trump through his first 4 years in office, and we were able to renegotiate the most important trade deal either of us have, which is the Canada-U.S. free trade deal, in a way that was beneficial to both our countries. And I know that as a successful negotiator, he likes to keep people a little off balance. The 51st state, that's not going to happen. It's just a non-starter. Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian, but people are now talking about that as opposed to talking about, for example, what the impact of 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum coming into the United States, on energy, whether it's oil and gas or electricity. I mean, no American wants to pay 25% more for electricity or oil and gas coming in from Canada. And that's something that I think people need to pay a little more attention to, and perhaps the idea of a 51st state is distracting a little bit from a very real question that will increase the cost of living for Americans and harm a trading relationship that works extremely well.
It's not just Canada. He's talking about taking over Greenland and the Panama Canal, in addition to annexing Canada through economic force, as he said. Do you think is this bullying? Is it trolling? Or should we not take seriously his expansionist desires?
No. I think we definitely need to take that seriously. I think from my very first conversations with him way back in 2016, he told me how much he admires Canada, how much he appreciates and likes us. So I think there is a certain amount of flattery in this, that he thinks that we are as great as we are. He's right. We are great. We're also very, very proud of being Canadian. If you talk to any Canadian, you ask them to define what it is to be a Canadian, they'll talk about all sorts of different things. But one of the things we will point out is, and we're not Americans.
I mean, he's been calling you the 51st governor. Do you take that as a compliment? Does that not bother you at all? How do you feel about that?
I've been in politics an awfully long time. I tend to focus on the substantive things and not on people choosing nicknames for me. I mean, if I was that thin-skinned, I probably wouldn't last that long in politics.
That is fair. You did make a trip down to Mar-a-Lago, and you did meet with the former and future president. What was that like? Tell me about that conversation.
It was nice to reconnect with him. Obviously, we had some good conversations about what we were going to be able to do together. He very clearly expressed what he had talked about in his tweet a few days before, that he has concerns about the border between Canada and the United States, particularly around migration and around fentanyl. I was pleased to highlight that less than 1% of the illegal migrants, less than 1% of the fentanyl that comes into the United States comes from Canada. So we're not a problem, but we're happy to, and we've actually responded to his request for us to do more with billions of dollars worth of investments to even further strengthen the security at our borders.
I'm assuming he didn't bring up his intention to publicly say he was going to annex through economic means your country? It
actually sort of came up at one point, and then we started musing back and forth about this. And when I started to suggest, well, maybe there could be a trade for Vermont or California for certain parts, he immediately decided that it was not that funny anymore, and we moved on to a different conversation. So this isn't out of the blue that he's doing this, but my focus has to be not on something that he's talking about that will not ever happen, but more on something that might well happen, that if he does choose to go forward with tariffs that raise the cost of just about everything for American citizens, that on top of that, we're going to have a robust response to that.
I want to ask you about your decision to resign, but you're staying on until the party elects a new leader sometime in March, but between now and then, the parliament is suspended. So for the American public, for others watching right now who are trying to understand what levers you have if he isn't listening to this rational argument, what are you prepared to do if he actually does this into the first couple weeks of his presidency?
As we did last time, we are ready to respond with tariffs as necessary. You may remember when Donald Trump put tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, which did nothing but raise the cost of steel and aluminum for American consumers. We responded by putting tariffs on things like bourbon, Harley Davidsons, orange juice, playing cards, these sorts of things that Canadians could find replacements for, so they wouldn't have to pay more for that money. And it ended up causing a lot of loss in American businesses for whom Canada is their #1 export partner. We are the #1 export partner of about 35 different U.S. states, and anything that thickens the border between us ends up costing American citizens and American jobs. That's not what President Trump got elected to do. I know he got elected to try and make life easier for all Americans, to support American workers. These are things that are going to hurt them.
Let me ask you about your decision to resign more broadly. And you've obviously talked publicly about this, but there are trends around the world that we've seen here in the United States. We've seen them across Europe. Obviously, you've been impacted by them. We're incumbents. It's an anti-incumbency movement around the world.
Yeah.
You also said when you resigned that you wanted to give your party a chance to win. So I think from your perspective, I'm wondering, is it more of a global trend issue in terms of where your approval ratings are now, which is the lowest they've been in your nearly 10 years? Or is it a you issue, as people should understand it?
Well, I think it's probably a bit of everything. I mean, right now there's a political cycle where incumbents, particularly those who steered us through COVID, I mean, Canada did extraordinarily well through COVID, better than just about every other peer, tens of thousands fewer deaths proportionately than our friends and allies around the world. Inflation hit less hard, our economy bounced back faster. It was good, but there is still a lingering frustration towards incumbents. And for me, where I lean in on is all the good things we were able to do. We've put forward policies that are going to make a difference for decades to come in Canada. And I think right now we're seeing a time in politics where emotions and social media is carrying an awful lot of weight in how people feel about things. But I'm always going to lean back on what are the substantive things that are being done? What are the substantive measures that make a big difference in people's lives? And standing up for the vulnerable, supporting people who need it, building an economy that works for the middle class. These are things that ultimately make the biggest difference in people's lives.
So we've talked about this in a previous video, how Trudeau is pointing out that Donald Trump just wants to distract by talking about Canada being the 50th state. And what this is really about more than anything is when Donald Trump came out and said that he would be levying tariffs against Canada and Mexico, both countries responded. And because we get so much lumber and so much energy through oil and gas from Canada, Donald Trump realized it would be affecting the energy prices he cared so much about and promised to bring down. And so he's lashing out in an attempt to distract, but Trudeau is shutting all of that down. And it's the reason why we've seen Trump go after so much and make all these posts and really just throw these tantrums. But I am so glad that Trudeau has made the effort to not only call Donald Trump out, but point out why he is doing this, all an effort to distract. And we have to break through that. We have to point out what this is really trying to accomplish instead of just kind of getting caught up in the day-to-day of covering Trump's nonsense. We have to make clear that he's doing this because he has already failed to keep his promises. And that is what we are going to be covering on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you're stuck around at the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.